Okay, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. It's called What's New in ENVI 5.5.3 and IDL 8.7.3. My name is Bill Akubo and I'm a product manager at L3 Harris Geospatial. On the intro slide, it may have said Amanda and Megan. That's a mistake. So my name is Bill. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The phone lines are muted for all attendees. So if you have any questions during the seminar, go ahead and type into the chat box on the GoToWebinar. Okay, and then we can try to answer as many of those as possible at the end of the presentation. We are recording the webinar and we will have that up on our website, l3harrisgeospatial.com, in the next few days. We'll also email you a link to the recording as well as the slide deck, which you are welcome to share with your colleagues. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Zach Norman. He'll be sharing some of the new and exciting features coming in the next version of ENVI and IDL. Zach is also a member of the product management team at L3 Harris Geospatial. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Zach and he'll get started.
Thanks for the introduction, Bill. We've got some really exciting content for everybody today. Just a quick little glance at our agenda before we get into everything. Here's a look at what we're going to be covering. There's a bunch of tools around visualization and reporting, report generation that we'll be covering. Also a whole handful of other features that just kind of clump together. One of the things that, since I've been here, we haven't ever done before is Bill and I are going to talk a little bit about what's next, what's coming over the next year for ENVI and IDL. So try to get you guys excited, maybe hear a little feedback or input, just to let you know what else we've got going on. So with that, and just to let you guys know what Bill and I look like, it's Bill on the left, myself on the right. So there's our contact information. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to us. As Bill mentioned, everyone will get a copy of the slides and the webinar recording will be posted on our website within the next day or two. So all that content will be heading your way. But again, let us know if you have any questions or if there's anything else that we can help you with. So with that, we're going to jump right into it. We're not doing our normal intro on who we are, just because we're guessing most of our attendees here are users of ENVI and IDL. If you're not familiar with who we are, feel free to check out L3 Harris, harrisgeospatial.com. There's also a link on the very last slide when we get to questions and discussion. So with that, we're going to jump on in to talk about some of the visualization and reporting and report generation tools that have been added to ENVI for this release. First couple things we're going to be talking about are some kind of ease of use and visual updates for annotations and symbols in ENVI. So on the left there, you'll see three different ways that text can be represented. So one of the new features that's been added is outline for text. So having an outlined around text really makes it pop, makes it a lot easier to see. And this outline is not only for text, it's also for symbols. So if you've used like the feature counting tool within ENVI, which maybe if you're familiar with deep learning, you've used it for deep learning. Now the symbols are much easier to see, especially have lots of colored and varied backgrounds. So on the right there is an example which shows symbols, text, just the different ways that they look and the representation. One other thing to call out there is the north arrow has also changed. So on the top right of that little screenshot, which shows just a yellow north arrow that also has an outline around it. So the previous north arrow just had this little white box. This is a little bit more modern, a little nicer looking. Continuing on with some other updates, new annotations and things that make it easier to work with annotations. There's a new image magnifier annotation, which lets you draw a box and show that area at full resolution. So here we have a helicopter landing pad, just as an example. There will be another couple examples of how you can use that in some slides, a couple from now. You can access the image magnifier through the annotations dropdown, and image magnifier is the name for accessing that. So nice new addition. On the right, and this is a big one that's for more than just annotations, you also see this in a few screenshots. In the lower right view of ENVI, we've actually updated the space underneath the toolbox to have a persistent metadata panel. What this means is any item that you have selected in ENVI's display will have properties, metadata, other information about that feature you have selected shown. So in this case, if you have an annotation selected, it'll give you all access to all of the properties. So changing if it's on the glass or just on the image, the font, the color, background, if you want to have outlines, just makes it easy to access all that instead of having to right click and go into properties. This is also really nice with images because it'll always tell you the pixel size. So if you have an image that is georeferenced, it'll say the actual pixel size in the data units that you have present. And this leads us into our major new feature for annotations in this release, which is PowerPoint report generation. So essentially, all this really does is takes ENVI's display and converts that into a PowerPoint slide. If you're familiar with all the capabilities in ENVI, you might be aware that there was already a chip to PowerPoint. What that previously did was just took a screen grab of ENVI's display and threw that into a PowerPoint slide. We have a lot more features in this that actually interactively lets you kind of move content around in ENVI's display. Click a single button, about a second later, it adds that content over into PowerPoint, taking over coordinates, an overview of where you are in the world, and anything else that's in ENVI's display. So like with this example that's up here, I have two views, an image magnifier, and some text. All of that goes over to the PowerPoint slide. We also get this nice little overview of where we are. And then this is also handy because once you're over in PowerPoint, you have access to all the tools that PowerPoint has available. So, we're not going to add all the annotations from PowerPoint in ENVI, which means that you can still use everything you need to mark stuff up and create quality content for presentations, for work or academia. Last little thing to call out, which we'll have a slide on as well, is that you can import PowerPoint templates or slides into ENVI and basically configure them. So when you actually chip your view into PowerPoint display, it sets up everything just as you like. So there's a handful of sample slides, so 4 that I'm going to be walking through in just a second. First, just to talk about the tool, here's ENVI's display. Up in the top left is a little projector screen icon. If you click on the projector screen icon, it will pop open the Chip to PowerPoint dialog. This dialog lets you select the template and the target presentation that you want to send your content to. Note that you do need to have Microsoft PowerPoint installed on your machine in order for this to work. So the dialog's very simple. There's a little chip button that'll actually send your content over to PowerPoint. And if you're looking closely at the screenshot, you might notice some other differences for ENVI's display. In particular, around the very edges of the screen, you'll see this kind of dark gray vertical bar. That dark gray bar lets you know what's within ENVI's view and what's not in ENVI's view for going to PowerPoint. So also in the center, you'll see this little light blue colored box. That's the center of this rectangle that's drawn in ENVI's display. You can click and drag that around. You can resize it. It will preserve the aspect ratio of whatever the target is in a PowerPoint slide. So that way it always fits right and looks nice when you send that over. But this is good because if you have multiple views, you can actually see what content gets in there. You might see that part of the north arrow gets cut off in this. So if you want to scoot the box over a little bit to the right to include the north arrow, you can do that, or you can use the north arrow that comes with some of the PowerPoint templates. So this also shows the image magnifier, which is zooming in on some imagery from Colorado taken in September, around the time when all of the leaves are changing. So those are aspen trees which turn yellow. Mountains look really pretty for a couple of weeks. So with that, we'll actually show a couple of example slides here. So this is the ENVI briefing template. I have a red box around it because it's not the proper sizing for the PowerPoint template I have here. My PowerPoint template is 16 by 9, and this ENVI briefing template, I think, is 4 by 3. And so, you know, I can bring in a PowerPoint that's a different aspect ratio, and I just have the box to accentuate that. So this is looking at the Grand Canyon. You'll see it's got its own pre-built north arrow in there. And if we look in the top right, we've got this little contextual map that shows us where the center of our view is located. In the top left, it's got the name of your layer, so the name of the raster that's actually being displayed. And we also have geographic and MGRS coordinate systems. Taking a look at another example template. So this is the full screen template. And these 4 templates I'm showing come out of the box with ENVI. So they're nice, good starting points if you want to customize things. So this full screen template here is in the Bay Area in San Francisco. So this shows the Golden Gate Bridge in an image magnifier. So I have this small little yellow box, which then I can see a lot more detail when I'm zoomed out at this scale. So just a nice one, shows some good pictures. If you look in the lower right, we have a slightly different contextual map, which is more of a you know, colored version of the surface of the Earth rather than that little globe. Next template that we've got is the square template. So just like the briefing template, this has a red box around it because it's not the same size as my PowerPoint that I'm presenting from right now. This is also a really good one that shows that anything that's in ENVI's display as a layer carries through when we actually send it to PowerPoint. So this nice bright red and green false color representation there is using the portal in ENVI's display to look at 3 spectral indices combined from Sentinel-2 data. So you might have seen a couple screenshots of this. I think one of our engineers is doing a weekly picture with our marketing team. I think it's on our Twitter or something like that. So it might look a little familiar, but this is nice because if you've got other things in ENVI, you know, maybe it's a band animation and you want a screenshot of that band animation, you can send all of that directly to PowerPoint. And the last template here is stories from above. So this is a picture of some glacial runoff in Greenland. It's 2 Sentinel-2 scenes mosaic together, captured during the summer months. So this is also just a nice picture to look at. I really like the colors in the water going from that white, you know, lots of sediment to this nice blue color and kind of some blue-green as well. But again, you can see in the lower right, there's some placeholder for source and copyright. We also have the mini map, which shows us in Greenland and the center of our view in latitude, longitude. Those are the templates that I had to display. I mentioned earlier that you can import PowerPoint templates into ENVI, and this is how you can do that. So in the Chip to PowerPoint dialog, there's a little white page icon. That's how you can create a new template. This is actually a really nice tool, and a picture does not do it justice because up in the top, it's got a list of all of the elements in that PowerPoint template. As I select on different ones, they're highlighted blue. So that way you know exactly what you're looking at. This template importer, you can put custom strings that translate to image metadata, you know, little map previews like we showed with your location, custom text, and more. These actual PowerPoint templates, once you've imported them, they're just saved as a simple JSON file on disk that you can then, you know, move around with your actual PowerPoint, share that with your coworkers or fellow ENVI friends, and everybody can access this. So if you're in a large organization where everybody needs to have the same consistent look and feel of reports that they might create or products they might generate, this is a great way to do that. So again, this is how you can bring in your own PowerPoint templates. ENVI ships with 6 or 7. I can't remember exactly how many. So if those don't fit your needs, you can always pick a different one. The last tool for our annotations and visualizations is Quick Mosaic. So there's a little video which hopefully is playing all right over the webinar. I'll sit here and talk about it while it plays a few times. What this was showing is 2 separate layers in ENVI's view. So if you're downloading Planet Labs data and you have 2 scenes right next to each other, if I go through and I select a scene and I change the stretch, it just updates it for one and not the other. So if you have many scenes over the same area and you want to have a consistent look and feel of all the data, there's a new shortcut that's been added. So if you right click on the view in ENVI's layer manager, there's a quick mosaic dropdown. And so what this does is this shows going through changing the stretch. I can right click and do a quick mosaic. My display is automatically updated. And then at that point, if I go through and I change the stretch to, from optimized linear to linear 2% or linear 5%, that's then made over all my scenes. They look homogeneous. So just for a much better look and feel and experience with this. So this is a nice little feature. Can definitely help you save some time, especially if you have 15 or 20 scenes, maybe aerial images that are have geolocation information, and you just want to view them all as one. This is a great way to do that. So moving on to our other features for ENVI and IDL. This is just kind of a whole bunch of different things, not quite enough for their own section, just all jumbled together. So just like every other release, we always update our sensors and data format support. So there's 4 different sensors and data formats that have been added. The 2 of the imagery ones worth calling out because they're hyperspectral are Prisma and DSIS. There's a new shapefile data extension for native format and the Göktürk-1 satellite as well. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. On the right is a screenshot of the DSIS data. So on the left of that screenshot, you'll see the 421 nanometer wavelength, which helps accentuate smoke because this imagery is over Australia, and maybe hopefully you're familiar with the fires that have been on the east side of Australia over the past month or so. We are also having a webinar coming up to talk about DSIS and some of the other cool things you can do with that data. Feel free to check that out if you want to learn more. Another very exciting feature for both our ENVI and IDL users, also a little bit embarrassing, our matrix multiplication used to be really, really slow in IDL. So we upgraded the library in IDL, which uses Intel's MKL library, which significantly improves the performance for matrix multiplication. So this little table down here shows how long it takes to multiply 2 floating point arrays that are the same size. You see, just using NumPy with Python, we were actually faster than Python for floating point arrays. All the way over on the right in IDL, it used to take 858 seconds because it's just way slow. So this has been updated, replaced. So this is a great feature for performance with IDL. And if you're an ENVI user, another reason that this might matter to you is some ENVI tasks are 10 to 20% faster. So there's a list there, not going to go through them. Just about anything that uses matrices is going to be quicker. And so that's a handful of them that use statistics. And some of the statistics also go through and do matrix math behind the scene. So this is a really exciting feature that's in here. There is an update for the platform support, which we'll talk about in a few slides when we take a look at what's next. But hopefully everybody's excited about this. Additionally, a couple of features that we wanted to call out. I don't think very many people are aware of these. These have actually been in IDL. Personally, for myself, I didn't know about the download web data on the right until a couple of months ago, and I'm on the product management team. So hopefully that doesn't say anything bad about me. But 2 things, on the left, we have the widget browser that's been added to IDL, so you can open web pages and communicate back and forth between IDL and the web page. It's not an IDL JavaScript bridge, but you can communicate back and forth. So feel free to take a look at that and make something cool with it. Something cool that we have made with it is actually the download web data tool within ENVI. So with so many data providers that all have their own web applications for searching and discovering data, rather than creating separate widgets or workflows in ENVI, using the widget browser, you can add your own bookmarks in addition to the list that you see here, which will take you to their website. It's just like a web page. So like for Planet Explorer, you can sign in, order your data, wait 5 or 10 minutes until it's available, download it, and then it'll automatically pop open and display that data in ENVI once it's ready to go. So this is a really helpful tool that's in ENVI and IDL. So it's a great way to access new data and create new widgets with IDL. Moving on to another feature for ENVI, we've added a new Spectral Library API, more an updated Spectral Library API. So with the new API, you can go through and create spectral libraries, add and remove spectra to those libraries, and programmatically open them for displaying. So when you open up a spectral library, or if you've used the old API, whenever you would call ENVI Spectral Library, it would automatically pop open the viewer. So if you just need to open up the spectral library and load it instead of adding in or popping up the UI, the interface, there's now a way that you can do that. Super easy to interact with, and this little example is straight from our documentation, which adds spectra and then goes through and does some spectral processing just to smooth out the data values. As always, with each one of our ENVI releases, we add some new ENVI tasks. So this nice, wonderful table, which has 8 different tasks that have been added. Some of the important ones to call out are our GeoJSON tools. So we have full GeoJSON support, so for importing and exporting. So if you have an ENVI ROI file that is geometry-based, then you can export that to GeoJSON, view that in web browser, other system, GIS database, whatever you need to do with it. The catch there is it has to be geometry based. So within ENVI, when you create an ENVI ROI, you can use things like thresholds or just select pixels. It has to be using geometry to get that to work. So nice thing about all these ENVI tasks, you can use the ENVI Modeler, IDL, ENVI Pi, ArcMap, or ArcPro. And just to touch on our ArcGIS integration, so we'll have this slide and another update here in just a couple slides. So we have support for ArcPro 2.4 and 10.7. The next version for 2.5 for ArcPro and 10.8 in ArcMap is coming. So we'll be talking about that in just a couple slides. So this is really nice. It's the ENVI Pi Python package, which lets you use and consume ENVI tasks from within an Esri environment. So this screenshot here shows some results from running hyperspectral image classification in the ENVI starter toolbox in ArcPro 2.4. One of the nice things about this is you can create your own custom toolbox, and just like our PowerPoint templates, you can share your PowerPoint templates. You can create a custom toolbox and share that toolbox with other people, and they can all use the same set of tools. So if you are familiar with image science, in ENVI, you can create a workflow with the ENVI modeler that maybe automates some spectral processing and extracting features. You can create that as a task, share that with your coworkers, and create a ENVI or a toolbox item in ArcPro that then calls that, and don't have to open up ENVI. It's all from an Esri interface. So, tying into some stuff that I think is a little bit more exciting, we want to talk a little bit about what's next. So first thing I want to make very clear and to call out is some of this is subject to change. So plans, typically always change, but this shows some of our desired timelines for this release, which to call out ENVI and IDL for ENVI 5.5.3 and IDL 8.7.3. Hopefully we will have them out in the next week or two. We're finishing just a few things up, and you should have access to those to download them. The next version, which is ENVI 5.6 and IDL 8.8, is going to be available this in the June and July timeframe. So getting everything ready for the Esri user conference this summer. All the way on the right, you'll see a little yellow box for 5.6.1. That's where we haven't done all of our planning. That's a desired date and some of the features that we're looking to actually create. There's some more things that aren't listed on these slides, but just to talk left to right and to call out some of the text boxes that are present. So for the next release of IDL, which is going to be coming out here in just a couple of weeks, Rel 6 is not going to be supported for IDL. The reason for this is the matrix multiplication update requires a bump for the minimum Linux kernel. So this is also a little bit early because I think Rel 6 is slated to be end of life or going from out of support later this year. So it's a little early for that. For the next release, two important things to call out for platform support. Windows 7 is no longer going to be supported on the next release. So this is the last release of ENVI and IDL to officially support Windows 7. For those that aren't familiar, Windows 7 has been end of life at the beginning of this year. So, a month ago, Windows 7 is no longer supported. We are also going to be officially supporting Mac OS X Catalina for 5.6. And part of this is because we're going to be updating the IDL workbench. So if you're a Mac user, like I've got one at home, you have to go through a little bit of a workaround to get the version of Java to work on Mac. So won't have that anymore with the next version for 5.6. There is a patch out and available on our website and a help article if you are using Catalina right now. So just to know that's coming. But for later this year, just to talk about the release a little bit, we have some exciting features planned for ENVI and IDL. So you might see there concurrent IDL. So one of the things that we're hoping to get in this year is threading in IDL. So just like other programming languages where you can spin off multiple threads, run stuff in the background, that's something we're hoping to add. And that also ties into a larger theme of performance enhancements and improving processing speed and throughput. So ENVI Queue Manager is something that will let you queue up a bunch of processes and hit go, and you could run them in parallel or just hit go at the end of the day, come back the next morning, see what's there. Through this, we're also going to be doing a bunch of DevOps modernization, so updating libraries for security vulnerabilities, which is a big thing a lot of people are doing now. You'll also see OGC on there. So we have plans to go through and revamp all of our OGC support for WMS, WCS, and WMTS as well, so that we have support for all the modern data layers, viewing remote data, things like that. So last thing to call out before we get to questions, and we'll be a couple minutes over, but hope you bear with us. Just as a quick update, so the ENVI Deep Learning module, if you're familiar, the 1.1 tech preview is available. So I'm not going to read everything on this slide. Just to talk about it a little bit, it's being able to access deep learning within ENVI and IDL without needing to program. So this is something that Bill and I both work on. So if you want to try this out, give us some feedback. Happy to help you get set up and try this on your real world scenarios and see how it works. With that, on to questions and discussion. So turn it back over to you, Bill.
Great, thanks, Zach. That was really good. Thanks for the in-depth presentation. So as Zach said, we can answer some questions now. So as a reminder, in the GoToWebinar, you can add your questions there. There's a few questions, Zach. Do you want to just address those preliminary ones that we had? Some of the details around the release date and so forth.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned it a little late in the presentation. So we're hoping to have the next release for the 5.5.3 for ENVI and IDL 8.7.3 wrapped up next week. So hopefully next week or the week after, you'll have that. So middle of the month, which we're almost at the middle of the month. That'll be available. You should have an email come out to you to let you know that that update is available.
Okay. Let's see, I think you already addressed the issue of the Mac OS 10 Catalina. And you mentioned that people should reach out to us if they want to know more about the ENVI Deep Learning module, or if they want to give that a try. We've got that in the tech preview state now, so that is available. Zach, I am looking at this chat box or the question box on the GoToWebinar, and for some reason it's really tiny, so I can't really see these questions very well. I'm wondering in your view if you can see that any better.
Yeah, sure thing. Here's a good one. We have ENVI and we have ArcGIS Pro. Do we need an extra license to use them together in the toolbox you've shown? Nope. So as long as you have ENVI and Arc Pro installed on the same system, it's no extra license or feature. So that's all out of the box. You can consume anything you can use in ENVI over in ArcGIS Pro. That does use our ENVI Task interface. So if you're not familiar with ENVI Tasks, check out our documentation. A good way to kind of get familiar with them and how you can tie them together to automate workflows is using the ENVI modeler. So two great things to check out if you're not familiar with them. And I think other than that, we answered just about all the other questions we have in there.
Okay. So I think if that's everything there, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks, Zach, for a great presentation. Just as a reminder, we've recorded this webinar, so we'll have that and the slides available in the next few days. And we will reach out to you to let you know when those are available. Okay?
Great.
All right.
Thanks
everyone.
Bill, and thanks everybody for joining us.